Oh my God.
The horse died in the snow, not from the bullet that would come later, but from something worse, from the understanding that no one cared if it lived or died. Silas Boon watched from across the frozen field and did the only thing a broken man could do. He walked toward it, toward the dying, toward the cold that would probably take him next. This is where the story actually starts, not with hope, not with a plan, but with a man who had nothing left to lose, walking through snow that was already 3 feet deep, toward an animal that the whole world had already forgotten. Silas was a thin man, 51 years old, though he looked 70. His face was burned dark brown by 30 years of sun. His hands were scarred and cracked. 2 of his fingers on the left hand were missing, taken by a logging accident that the foreman had never reported and the ranch owner had never paid for. His hair was gray and thin. His beard was salt and pepper. His eyes were the color of old stone, the kind of eyes that had seen too much and cared too little about surviving anymore. He had not spoken to another human being in 9 days. The cabin sat on the edge of nowhere, 5 miles outside the town called Drowned Creek. There were only 2 rooms. One had a bed made of old rope and straw. The other had a table, 2 chairs, and a stove that burned wood. He had no money left. No food except 6 potatoes buried in dirt under the floorboards and dried meat hanging from a string in the corner. His last paying job had ended 3 months ago when Thomas Everett's son Jacob decided he wanted younger cowboys men with straight backs and teeth that weren't falling out. The firing had come on a Tuesday. Jacob had paid him 1 week's wages and told him not to come back. Silas had walked out with his final dollars and had not worked since. 3 ranches had said no. The logging company had said no. The town had decided they didn't need an old man anymore, and Silas had stopped trying. He had tried for 6 weeks to get work. He had walked to every ranch within 15 miles. He had offered to work for food alone. He had offered to break horses, the only thing he had ever been good at. But the world was moving on. The world did not need Silas Boon, and Silas Boon was starting to believe it. The money had lasted until November. His savings from 20 years of steady work at the Everett Ranch, $700 that he had saved dollar by dollar, was completely gone. Spent on food, on wood for the stove, on the small costs of staying alive when no one was paying you to work. By December, he was eating rabbits he trapped himself. By January, he stopped leaving the cabin most days. By February, the isolation had become so complete that he sometimes forgot what his own voice sounded like. But on a Tuesday morning in early March, with snow falling so thick that you could only see 15 feet in any direction, Silas did something that made no sense. He left the cabin. He walked 5 miles into town. He walked to the auctioneer's yard. And he stood in the freezing cold, watching livestock be sold to people who bid on them like they were buying firewood. The auctioneer's name was Crawford. He was a thin man with teeth the color of an old fence. He had always hated Silas for reasons Silas had never understood. Maybe because Silas was quiet and Crawford needed to fill silences. Maybe because Silas was good with animals and Crawford was cruel to them. Or maybe Crawford just hated anyone who was weaker than him. And on this particular day, Silas was about as weak as a man could be. Crawford sold broken animals, horses that were too old, mules that were stubborn, cattle that were sick. A cow with a bad leg went for $3. A horse with a cut on its face went for $2.50. A mule that was half dead went for $1. 7 men stood around the yard. They all worked for other ranches. They all were trying to buy cheap animals that could be fixed or killed for their meat or hides. Then Crawford brought out the last animal of the day. It was a horse. A buckskin mare that was maybe 8 or 9 years old. The animal was so thin you could count every single rib on its body. There were bones showing through the skin. The horse had one eye that looked okay and one eye that looked scared. The left back leg had a deep scar that ran from the hip all the way down to the hoof. The kind of scar that comes from being whipped or kicked or caught in something sharp and painful. The horse was not moving much, just standing in the freezing cold, shaking. Crawford spit on the ground. He laughed. "Here we got a useless piece of broken meat," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Who wants her? I will start the bidding at 50 cents. Nothing happened. No one raised their hand. No one said anything. 40 cents, Crawford said. Still nothing. 20 cents then. 20 cents for a horse. A man in the back laughed. "I will give you 5 cents to shoot her and save her the trouble of freezing to death," he said. The other men laughed with him. Crawford was getting angry now. He did not like selling animals for nothing. 10 cents, he said. Final bid. Anyone? 10 cents. And that is when Silas felt something inside his chest that he thought had died months ago. It was not hope. It was not even happiness. It was something smaller and stranger. It was the feeling of recognizing yourself in something else. Of looking at that broken horse with its scared eye and its sharp bones and its useless body, and seeing exactly what he saw in the mirror every morning. He stepped forward. The 7 men turned to look at him. They knew who he was, the old man who had been fired. The one with no money. The one who everyone had forgotten. "How much you got, Boon?" Crawford asked, and his voice was already laughing, already making fun. Silas reached into his pocket. He pulled out $3. It was everything. Every single penny he had left. He had been keeping it for the hard months ahead, for March when the cold would stay longer, for April when food would still be scarce. He had been saving this money like it was his last chance at life. $1.50, Silas said. His voice came out rough because he had not used it in 9 days. Crawford's eyes got big. He looked at the money. He looked at Silas. Then he started smiling like he had just stolen something. $1.50 for a dying horse. "Sure, old man, sure. She is all yours." Silas handed over the bills. Crawford gave him a rope connected to the horse's neck. And Silas walked out of that yard leading an animal that was worth nothing, that could do nothing, that was probably going to die in the next week anyway. He was walking away from his last money. He was walking away from his chance at surviving March. He was walking into something that made no sense at all. But when he looked at the horse, he saw something that no one else had seen. Underneath the scars and the bones and the fear in that one eye, there was still something alive. Something that had not completely given up. Something that remembered what it was like to be more than this broken thing standing in the snow. He gave her a name before they even reached the cabin. He called her Grace, and as he walked through the falling snow with the rope in his hand and the dying horse behind him, Silas Boon made a choice that would change everything. A choice that made no sense. A choice that was born from nothing but the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe 2 broken things could somehow help each other stay alive. The snow fell harder, and Silas kept walking, and Grace kept following.
Grace did not eat the first
and in that
day.
moment,
She stood in the
neither
corner
of
of
them
the
had
stable
any
that
idea
Silas
what was
had
about
built
to
from
happen
old wood
next.
and nails, and she did not move. She did not drink water. She did not look at him. She just stood there, shaking. Her body was so thin that every breath moved her ribs like they were trying to escape her skin. The scar on her back leg had started bleeding again. Silas could see the blood running down her leg, dripping onto the dirt floor. He did not try to touch her. He just sat on the ground 10 feet away and waited. He waited all through the day. He waited through the night. And he did nothing but sit and breathe and let her understand that he was not going to hurt her. By the morning of the second day, Silas knew something that most people would not have understood. He knew that Grace had been hit. Not once, but many times. He knew that she had learned, through pain, that humans were dangerous. He knew that her fear was not wild or crazy. It was smart. It was the way a creature protects itself when the world has shown it nothing but cruelty. Silas had only $1.50 left in his pocket now. That was everything he had. He walked to the general store in Drown Creek. The woman who worked there was named Mary. She was maybe 60 years old, with gray hair and a face that had learned kindness from hard living. Most people in town did not speak to Silas anymore. But Mary was different. "I need to buy feed for a horse," Silas said. His voice was still rough from not being used. Mary's eyes got small and careful. "You do not have money for a horse, Silas," she said, not mean, just honest. "No," he said, "but I have this." He put the $1.50 on the counter. Mary picked it up. She looked at it. Then she looked at Silas for a long time without saying anything. Finally, she said, "What kind of horse?" "A broken one," Silas said. Mary nodded like this explained everything. She went to the back room and came back with a bag of good oats. Not the cheapest kind, the kind that was actually worth something. "This will cost you $1, she said. "The other 50 cents you owe me when you can pay it back." Silas started to say he could not accept that. But Mary stopped him. "You're going to pay me back, Silas," she said. It was not a question. It was a statement about who he was. "Because you're not the kind of man who does not pay his debts." When he got back to the cabin, Grace smelled the oats. For the first time, her head moved. She turned slightly. Her nostrils opened. She was interested. Silas put the oats in a low pile on the ground and walked away. He did not watch her. He did not stay close. He gave her privacy to make the choice. It took an hour, but Grace walked over to the oats and started eating. That night, Silas did something that changed everything. The temperature was dropping. It was going to freeze hard. He had a small stove in the cabin, but the stable was going to be cold enough to kill an animal that was already weak. So Silas made a decision. He took a blanket from his own bed. He brought it to the stable, and he lay down on the dirt floor next to Grace. The horse was afraid at first. She moved away from him, but the night was cold, colder than anything either of them had experienced. And slowly, very slowly, Grace moved back toward him. She did not touch him at first. She just lay down beside him, leaving space between them. And Silas did not move. He did not try to comfort her. He just lay there, letting her understand that his warmth was available if she needed it. By the middle of the night, Grace had moved closer. Her body was against his back, and Silas felt the warmth of her and the steady beating of her heart against his spine. And for the first time in months, he did not feel alone in the world. Every morning after that, Silas would wake before dawn. His back would hurt. His bones would be cold, but he would feel Grace's heartbeat still pressed against him, and he would get up and go to the general store and buy more oats with money he did not have. By the end of the first week, Silas had spent everything he owned on feed for the horse. He had nothing left. No money for his own food. No money for wood for the stove in the cabin. No money for anything. He was broke in the way that only a desperate man can be broke. People in town started to notice. The shopkeeper Mary saw him every day. Other people saw him too, and they began to talk. "That crazy old man is spending money he does not have on a horse that is going to die anyway," said Crawford at the saloon. "I sold her to him for $1.50. He probably does not even realize she is going to be dead in a month." "He gave up his last money," Mary said, and her voice was quiet and dangerous. "He is buying feed for an animal that everyone else has already thrown away." "That is stupid," Crawford said. "No," Mary said. "That is love." Silas did not know that people were talking about him. He was too busy trying to stay alive while also keeping Grace alive. He started eating once a day. He would make a thin soup from water and whatever he could find, bark from trees, roots, sometimes an animal he could trap. He would eat small and save as much as he could to buy oats for Grace. But something was happening that no one predicted. Grace was changing. By the end of the first month, the wild look was leaving her eye. The shaking had stopped. She still limped on her back leg, but it was healing. The scar was starting to close. And most importantly, the scared animal that had stood in the corner of the stable was becoming something else. She was becoming calm. She was becoming curious. She would follow Silas around the stable like a dog. She would rest her head against his shoulder. One afternoon in early April, Silas was cleaning her wound. It had gotten infection and was swollen. He used hot water and cloth to clean it carefully. Grace did not try to run. She did not try to kick. She just stood there, trusting him to help her hurt. And Silas knew in that moment that something impossible had happened. The broken horse had learned to trust again. And in learning to trust her, Silas had learned to trust living again. He made a promise to her while he was cleaning that wound. He said it out loud, so his voice would make it real. "You're never going to be hurt again, Grace," he said. I do not know how I'm going to make that true, but I swear it on everything I am. No one is ever going to hurt you again. Grace turned her head and looked at him with both eyes now. Both of them clear. Both of them calm. And it was on that afternoon, while Silas was making a promise he had no idea how to keep, that the carriage came flying down the road. The crash happened so fast and so loud that both of them heard it. And that sound, that terrible sound of wood breaking and people screaming, would bring Silas the worst moment and the best moment of his life, all in the same day. The crash came at noon on a Tuesday. Silas heard it before he understood what it was, a sound like thunder but wrong, like the world breaking. He was in the stable with Grace when the noise happened. The horse jumped and moved behind him, using his body as protection. He did not think. He just ran toward the sound. The carriage was overturned on the road, 500 feet from his cabin. One horse was dead. Another horse was screaming and pinned under wood. And inside the carriage, trapped in the wreckage, were people. A man was shouting. A woman was crying. And a baby, a small baby, was wailing in a way that made Silas's heart stop. Silas did not stop to think about whether he should help. He did not think about whether it was his problem. He just moved. He grabbed the carriage frame. The wood was heavy, heavier than anything he had ever tried to lift. His back screamed. His old injuries, the logging accident from years before, the work that had broken his body slowly over decades, all of it came alive with pain. But he kept pulling. "Help me," a man's voice said. It was Reverend James Hadley, the religious man from town. "Help me get my wife out." Silas did not answer. He just pulled harder. The frame moved just enough for the Reverend to pull his wife, Martha, out of the wreckage. She was holding a baby. The baby could not have been more than 6 months old. His name was Thomas. The second Silas knew they were safe, his body stopped working. The carriage frame came down on his left shoulder and pinned him to the ground. Pain exploded through him like lightning. He could not move. He could not breathe right. He thought, in a moment that was strangely clear, that this was how he was going to die. Pinned under a carriage, helping people he did not know. But the Reverend did not leave him. He came back. He lifted the frame with help from his wife, even though her arm was broken and hanging at a wrong angle. They got Silas out. They carried him into his cabin, and they stayed with him through the afternoon, asking nothing, wanting nothing, just making sure he was alive. The Reverend looked at Silas before they left. "You saved my family," he said. "You saved my son's life. I will never forget that, and neither will God." Silas did not believe in God much anymore, but he nodded anyway because the Reverend needed him to. 3 weeks later, Silas could barely move his arm. The pain had become his constant companion. He could not work. He could not even lift hay bales. He thought his life was over, that he would lose the cabin, that he and Grace would starve, that everything he had fought for would disappear. That is when a knock came on his door. A woman stood outside. She was maybe 45 years old, with dark hair and eyes that saw everything. Her name was Emma Everett. She was the wife of Thomas Everett, the man who had fired Silas 3 months before. Emma had come alone. No husband, no servants, just herself. "The Reverend told me what you did," she said. She did not come inside. She did not make small talk. She was direct and clear and powerful. "He told me you saved his son. You risked your body. You put yourself under that carriage." Silas said nothing. "My husband fired you," Emma said. "He said you were too old. He said you were worthless. But I know what he does not know. I know what kind of man works with animals the way you do. My husband breaks horses with cruelty and force. You break them with kindness. That is a different thing entirely." She paused. She looked at the cabin. She looked at Grace in the pasture. Then she looked back at Silas. "I'm taking over the management of the ranch," she said. "My husband does not know this yet, but I have the documents. I have the authority, and I'm going to hire you back. You will work for me, not him. You will have a cottage on the property. You will have steady wages, and you will bring that horse with you." Silas opened his mouth to say something, but Emma held up her hand. "This is not charity," she said. "This is business. I need someone who understands horses. I need someone who can break wild animals without destroying them. I need someone with a good heart. That is you." And that is how Silas Boon came to work at the Everett Ranch again. Thomas Everett was furious when he found out. He screamed at his wife. He said she was making a mistake. He said the old man was useless. But Emma had already made her choice. And Emma, it turned out, was stronger than Thomas in every way that mattered. The first week at the ranch was strange. The other cowboys did not know what to think of Silas. He was the old man who had been fired. Now he was back. But the moment he started working with the horses, everything changed. A young stallion named Copper had been in the stable for 3 weeks. The animal had thrown every rider who tried to mount him. He had bitten the ranch hands. He had kicked so hard that he broke a fence. Everyone said he was too wild, too dangerous, not worth the trouble. Silas asked to work with him. For days, Silas did nothing but stand in the pasture with Copper. He did not have a rope. He did not have a saddle. He just stood there, speaking softly, moving slowly. Other cowboys laughed at him. "That old man is crazy," they said. "That horse is going to kill him." But Copper did not kill him, because Copper was not angry. He was afraid. He was a young animal that had been handled roughly and had learned that humans were dangerous. Just like Grace. Just like every broken thing in the world, they were not born bad. They were made bad by cruelty. By the second week, Copper was following Silas around the pasture like a dog. By the 4th week, Silas could touch him without the horse jumping away. By the 8th week, Silas could ride him. Not because he had forced the horse, but because the horse had decided, on his own, that Silas was safe. The ranch hands saw this happen. They stopped laughing. They started watching. And word began to spread through the territory that there was an old cowboy at the Everett Ranch who could do impossible things with horses. But Thomas Everett was getting darker. He drank more. He stayed out at night. He made plans with a man named Jackson Mercer, a rough man from the next county who was known for being cruel to animals. Silas overheard them one night talking about breeding programs, about taking the best horses, including Copper, and selling them to Mercer for profit and fighting purposes. Silas went to Emma. He told her what Thomas was planning. Emma's face became very still. She did not cry. She did not get angry. She just went very quiet inside. And then she said something that would change everything. "He is going to learn," she said softly, "what it costs to hurt something innocent. Not today, not tomorrow, but he will learn." 3 weeks later, Emma hired a lawyer. She filed papers. She separated from Thomas completely. She took the ranch. She took the money. She took Copper. And Thomas Everett, the man who had fired Silas, who had planned to sell the horses to a cruel man, who had built his life on the suffering of others, lost everything. He left town the same day the divorce was final. No one ever saw him again. And Silas understood something in that moment. He understood that there was a kind of justice that did not come from courts or sheriffs. It came from people who saw injustice and decided they were not going to accept it. People like Emma. People who would risk their own safety and security to protect something good. 2 years after Silas came back to the Everett Ranch, something had happened that no one could have predicted. The place had become famous. Not famous like a town is famous, but famous across the whole territory. People came from 50 miles away just to see what was happening there. Emma had made a decision that changed everything. She wanted to build something that had never been built before. A place where horses that were broken could come to heal. A sanctuary. A safe place. She said it to Silas on a spring morning when they were working together in the east pasture. "I want to save broken things," she said. "The way you save broken things." Silas did not answer right away. He was thinking about Grace, about Copper, about all the animals that had been thrown away by the world and had learned, through his care, that they could trust again. "We will need money," he said finally. "I have money," Emma said. She smiled. "And I have you. That is all we need." Over the next 2 years, Silas and Emma built this sanctuary together. They built new stables. They built water systems. They built pastures that stretched for miles. They hired good workers, men who understood that horses were not machines, men who understood that broken things needed time to heal. And horses started arriving. Owners would bring animals that were wild or scarred or sick or old. Animals that no one wanted anymore. Animals that people said were worthless. And Silas would work with them. Slowly, patiently. He would teach them that humans could be safe, that kindness could be real, that trust could be rebuilt even when it had been destroyed. Grace had become something of symbol. She was getting old now, 16 years old, which is old for a horse. But she was beautiful in a way that broken things sometimes are. Her scars had faded. Her ribs no longer showed. Her eyes were clear and calm. And every person who came to the sanctuary, he saw her and understood what was possible. If Grace could survive what she had survived and become peaceful and whole, then maybe anything could be healed. Silas was 55 years old now. His back was still broken from the carriage accident. His shoulders still ached on cold mornings. But he had found something that money could never buy. He had found purpose. He had found work that mattered. And he had found a woman, Emma, who understood why saving broken things was worth anything. One afternoon in early April, Reverend Hadley came to the ranch. He arrived with his wife, Martha, who still had a small scar on her arm from the carriage accident. They brought their son, Thomas. The boy was almost 3 years old now. He was walking and talking and asking questions about everything. I wanted him to see the place where his life was saved, the Reverend said. He looked at Silas. I wanted him to see the man who saved his life. Martha knelt down to let Thomas touch Grace. The old mare stood still and patient while a small boy put his hands on her neck. And Silas watched this moment. A child whose life had been saved, touching a horse whose life had also been saved, and he understood what it meant to matter. "You changed my life," the Reverend said to Silas. "You took my son from the wreckage, and then you built this place, this beautiful place where broken things can heal. I will never forget that, and my family will never forget it." That night, the Hadleys left, but they left something behind. They left gratitude. And gratitude, Silas would learn, is a debt that people pay in unexpected ways. Everything changed on a Tuesday in late April. 15 men arrived at the ranch just before noon. They came on horseback. They came hard and fast. Their leader was a man named Jackson Mercer. Silas had heard of him. Everyone had heard of him. He was a cattle baron from the next county. He was known for violence. He was known for getting what he wanted, no matter what he had to do to get it. Mercer walked into the main house where Emma was working. He did not knock. He just walked in like he owned the place. "I want to buy horses," he said. "Your best horses. I will pay good money." Emma looked at him calmly. "I do not sell to everyone," she said. "You will sell to me," Mercer said. His voice was not a request. It was a threat. "No," Emma said. "I will not." Mercer's face got red. "I want copper, and I want that old buckskin mare. Grace, I will give you $3,000. "No," Emma said again. Mercer stepped closer to her. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. His voice was very quiet now, which was scarier than when he was loud. "Yes," Emma said. "You are a man who uses animals for fighting. I do not do business with men like that." Mercer left, but he did not go far. That night, Silas overheard the ranch hands talking. Mercer and his men were camping just 2 miles away. They were planning something. Mercer did not like being told no. Mercer was used to taking what he wanted. Silas went to Emma. She was sitting in her office, writing by candlelight. "He is going to steal them," Silas said. "He is going to come in the night and take copper and Grace." Emma put down her pen. She looked very tired suddenly. "I know," she said. "We should move them," Silas said. "We should hide them in the south pasture. We should lock the gates. We should prepare." "No," Emma said. She stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the darkness. "We are not going to hide. We are not going to run. We are going to do something else." "What?" Silas asked. "We're going to call in a debt," Emma said. She turned to face him. "The Reverend. He told me his family owes us a debt. He told me that if I ever needed help, I should ask. I'm going to ask." She sat down at her desk and started writing letters. She wrote all through the night. By morning, she had written to every person who had brought a broken horse to the sanctuary. She had written to every rancher who respected what they were doing. She had written to the Reverend and his family. The message was simple. Come to the Everett Ranch on Friday. Bring as many men as you can. Come ready to stand against someone who wants to steal what we have built. "They will not come," Silas said. "Why would they risk themselves for horses?" Emma looked at him. "Because they have seen what we have done here," she said. "Because they understand that some things are worth protecting. Because we gave them hope. And people do not forget hope." Friday came. Silas woke up early. He went to check on Grace. The old horse was standing in her pasture, calm and peaceful, not knowing that this day would change everything. He ran his hand down her neck. He thought about the moment he had bought her for $1.50. He thought about all the nights they had spent together, keeping each other warm. He thought about the promise he had made her, that no one would ever hurt her again. "I'm going to keep that promise," he whispered to her. "Whatever happens today, I'm going to keep it." And that is when he heard it. The sound of hoofbeats, coming from the east, coming hard and fast, but not the sound of 15 men. The sound of many more. The sound of 50, then 100, then all of them, 150 riders coming toward the Everett Ranch. Coming because people remembered kindness. Coming because Emma had called out a debt. Coming because sometimes broken people protect broken things with the same fierceness that a mother protects her child. Silas stood in the pasture with Grace, and for the first time since this all started, he understood that they might actually survive this. The sun came up red that morning. Not orange, not yellow, red like blood in the sky. Silas woke before it got light. He had not slept. He had sat in the stable all night with Grace, running his hands down her neck, feeling her heartbeat, making sure she was real and alive in there. He had made a promise to her years ago. He had said, "No one is ever going to hurt you again." And he was terrified in the deepest part of his soul that he was about to break that promise. At 5 in the morning, he heard Emma moving around the ranch house. She was giving orders. She was telling the workers to get the horses into the north pasture. She was telling them to lock the gates. She was doing all the things you do when you are preparing for a battle that you cannot predict. Silas walked out of the stable. The sky was starting to turn from black to purple. The birds were just beginning to sing. It was a beautiful morning, the kind of morning that does not care if people are about to suffer. Emma was standing in the middle of the ranch yard. She was wearing pants. She was wearing a gun belt, and she looked like a woman who had decided that no one and nothing was going to take what she had built. "They will be here soon," she said to Silas. "Mercer and his men. And our people?" Silas asked. "They will be here too," Emma said. She looked at him. "You did the right thing, saving that baby, building this place, teaching me that broken things can heal. Everything you did led to this moment." The Hadleys did not forget. The ranchers did not forget. The people did not forget. Silas thought about the Reverend, about Martha, about baby Thomas who had watched Grace stand still while his small hands touched her neck. He thought about all the broken horses that had come to the sanctuary. He thought about all the people who had seen those horses transform. Why would they come? Silas asked. Why would they risk themselves for horses? Emma smiled. "Because you taught them something," she said. "You taught them that one person can matter. That one act of kindness can change everything. And when kindness is threatened, people protect it." At 7 in the morning, Mercer and his 15 men arrived. They came hard and fast, riding down the main road like they owned the world. Mercer was in front. He was a big man, thick neck, hard face, the kind of man who had never been told no and had never accepted a refusal. His men were worse. They looked like they had done violence before and would do it again. Mercer rode right up to Emma. He did not smile. "You had time to think about my offer," he said. "I'm going to give you one more chance. Give me Copper and Grace. Give me 10 other horses, and I will not burn this place to the ground." Emma did not move. She did not look scared. She looked like she was made of stone. "No," she said. Mercer's hand went to his gun, but he never touched it, because that is when the hoofbeats started. They came from the east. First, you could only hear them. Then you could feel them, the ground shaking under your feet. Then you could see them. 50 riders, 100 riders, then more. They came in a wave. They came in a flood, and they surrounded Mercer and his men completely. The Reverend was in front. He was riding a horse like he had been riding horses his whole life. Behind him came other ranchers, men from the neighboring counties, men who had brought broken horses to the sanctuary, men who had seen their animals transform, men who had understood in their hearts that what Emma and Silas were doing mattered. Then came the shopkeeper Mary. She was not on a horse. She was in a wagon with supplies, because she understood that sometimes standing with someone means you have to stay all day. Then came boys, ranch hands, workers, people from the town of Drowned Creek. Some of them had guns. Most of them did not. But all of them had come because they believed in something. 150 people surrounded Mercer. Mercer's face went white, then red, then white again. His men looked at each other. They looked at the army that had surrounded them, and they understood, without anyone saying anything, that they had lost. The Reverend rode forward slowly. He stopped 50 feet from Mercer. He did not draw a gun. He did not threaten anything. He just spoke, and his voice carried across the whole space. "This property is under protection," the Reverend said. "These horses are under protection. And this man," he pointed to Silas, "is under protection. You will leave now. You will not come back. And you will not hurt anything that belongs to this sanctuary. Because if you do, you will answer to all of us." Mercer looked at the 150 people. He looked at the Reverend. He looked at Silas standing next to Emma. And something inside him calculated the cost of what he wanted. He decided the cost was too high. He turned his horse around. His men followed. They rode away without firing a single shot. The danger ended as quickly as it had come. When they were gone, there was a moment of complete silence. No one moved. No one spoke. It was like the whole world was holding its breath. And then the Reverend turned to face the crowd. "This man saved my son's life," he said, pointing to Silas. "He pulled my baby from a wrecked carriage. He risked his body. He risked his life. And then he built this." He gestured to the sanctuary. He built a place where broken things can heal. And if that is not worth protecting, then I do not know what is. One by one, people started clapping. The sound started small. Then it grew. It grew until it was like thunder. It grew until it was deafening. And Silas stood there, an old broken man, and felt seen, felt valued, felt like he mattered in the world. The next year changed everything. Newspapers came and wrote about what had happened. Magazines sent people to photograph the sanctuary. Visitors came from across the country to see the famous horse healer. Silas tried to ignore it. He tried to just keep doing the work. But the attention was impossible to ignore. By the following year, there were more job offers than Silas could accept. Wealthy people wanted him to come work for them. Universities wanted to study his methods. But Silas stayed at the Everett Ranch because that is where the sanctuary was. That is where broken things came to heal. Grace lived for 7 more years after that day. She died at 23 years old, in the pasture where she had learned to trust. When she died, every single person at the sanctuary came and stood with her. They stood in silence, and they remembered what it meant to be saved. Copper became the most famous horse in the territory. His bloodline produced animals known for being gentle and intelligent. Animals that people loved because they came from a horse that had been healed by kindness. And Silas Boon, who at 43 had nothing, no wife, no children, no hope, became something he had never expected to be. Not rich, not famous in the way that important men are famous, but remembered, respected, and loved in the quiet way that people love those who have shown them what kindness looks like when it matters most. He lived to be 81 years old. When he died, there were 200 people at his funeral. The Reverend spoke. Emma spoke. And they all told the story of the old man who had bought a broken horse for $1.50. The old man who had shown them that broken things could be fixed. The old man who had taught them that one person's kindness can change the world. The moral of this story is simple. It is not complicated. It is just this, sometimes a single act of care, spending your last dollar on something no one else values, ripples outward in ways you could never predict. Sometimes being broken teaches you how to help others break free. And sometimes the debt you owe to the world does not get paid by the person who helped you. It gets paid by everyone who learned, through their example, what it means to stand for something good. Grace's grave still stands at the Everett Ranch. And every person who comes to the sanctuary now sees her grave first. And they understand, before they do anything else, that broken things matter. That broken things deserve to live. And that kindness, real kindness, never dies.